Okay, so starting off today's show, I wanted to preview tonight's Thursday night football game between the Green Bay Packers and the San Francisco 49ers, and also talk a little bit about everything going on with the San Francisco 49ers as of late. I do feel like very often on this show, over the last couple weeks, the 49ers have been a team that we've been talking about, whether it was that game where they got absolutely embarrassed at home by the Miami Dolphins, or whether it was the game that they beat the Rams on Sunday Night Football and just had a really impressive performance, or whether it was going on the road to New England last week at this time and winning, and then going to Seattle and getting the absolute beats again. And San Francisco right now is sitting with a 4-4 record. And technically, when you look at the standings in the NFC, I understand they're not out of it yet. They're sitting at 4-4 and are only a game and a half behind the Arizona Cardinals and a game behind the LA Rams, and they technically are still right in that wild card picture. But when you look at all of the injuries that this San Francisco 49er team is facing right now, it could be a long and tough road to climb in order for them to make the playoffs. And there was news that dropped yesterday that Jimmy Garoppolo may miss the rest of the season with an ankle injury. And the question is, do you guys see the 49ers moving on from Jimmy Garoppolo here? And I do think, actually, that last week we saw Jimmy Garoppolo play his last game as a San Francisco 49er. I actually think that there is a very good chance that that has been the case, because he may get surgery for the ankle. If so, he's out for the year. If not, he could still return in about 6 weeks. But even if he does, I don't know if he's going to be able to be 100%. Nick Mullins somehow, someway actually looked good last week against the Seattle Seahawks defense, so I'm curious to see if he's going to be able to do anything tonight. But yeah, I think there's a very good chance that Jimmy Garoppolo is done in San Francisco. You could look at his contract, and he is signed for 2 more seasons. His cap hit next year is 26.9. Trade him, whatever, then 2.8 of that is dead money. And that's nothing. That will not be the reason why I believe the San Francisco 49ers hold on to Jimmy Garoppolo as their starting quarterback. I think if you're the San Francisco 49ers, and this year, the pace they're on, there's a very good chance that they finish 6-10 with all these injuries and their schedule. They may just fall off a cliff here. And if that happens, and they're picking around 10th in the NFL draft, I think you have to draft a Trey Lance or a Zach Wilson, because watching either of those guys play, I think they would be a good fit in San Francisco. And that would be a cheap quarterback with a lot of upside who is controllable for the near future on a rookie deal. You now have all of that freed up cap space to improve the team all over the place wherever you want to do it. Ultimately, the question the San Francisco 49ers are going to have to answer is this. In your eyes, is Jimmy Garoppolo worth essentially $30 million? In my eyes, the answer is no. Because you could draft a quarterback for cheap, and hopefully if you hit on him, and given Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch's track record, I think you would have to feel pretty confident that they would, then I think this San Francisco 49er team could turn it around relatively quickly. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is worth essentially $30 million. In today's market, you can make the argument he is, because his record is 22-8, but I think you could also say that the 49ers are 22-8 and Jimmy Garoppolo just happens to be the quarterback leading that team. And let's go back to the season where the San Francisco 49ers were 1-10. And Jimmy Garoppolo comes in, he gets traded from the New England Patriots. That was actually Kyle Shanahan's first year as the head coach, 2017. And if you remember, the San Francisco 49ers beat the Jacksonville Jaguars that ended up making the playoffs that year. And they won 5 games in a row to end the season because of Jimmy Garoppolo. And I remember after play in those 5 games and really essentially be the main reason why the San Francisco 49ers won, I was like, all right, I'm super optimistic about this guy. I think Kyle Shanahan's a good coach. And I remember going into the season that Jimmy Garoppolo tore his ACL the following season, so this is 2018 now, I was actually pretty high on San Francisco. But we know what happens. In week 1, he tears his ACL against the Minnesota Vikings, and the San Francisco 49ers season just went downhill from there. Now, luckily, luckily for them, they got something out of it because they got the number 2 pick. They draft Nick Bosa, and he unfortunately is hurt now, but last year he was one of the main contributors to that team. And we did see what Jimmy Garoppolo, when he is good, is worth. However, my issue is this. I really haven't seen the same Jimmy Garoppolo pre-ACL. Since he's came back from the torn ACL, he just hasn't really been the same player to me. And there are going to be people that just make the argument that the San Francisco 49ers were in the Super Bowl with the lead. He missed the biggest throw of his life, but they still feel like the guy hasn't gotten enough credit for what he's done so far. They've been better when he's on the field, no doubt about it. But the question is, do you pay him another $30 million for one more run? For me, I don't think I would. It's a 50-50 decision for Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, and they look at it and ask, is he an above-average QB? So far this season, and I know he's been banged up, I don't think he has. Now, normally he's not terrible. He's average. He's limited. But you can make the argument that they should keep him. It's a debate. They were a better Jimmy Garoppolo pass away from winning the Super Bowl last year. But at the same time, I also do feel like if Kyle Shanahan had his own quarterback that he could draft, and a quarterback that when he's game planning for, he wouldn't have to scheme the whole game around, they would be a team that not only would be good, but we would be consistently in the Super Bowl hunt each and every season. And I do feel like everyone knows that, especially last season, the San Francisco 49ers defense was very good. I get it. They were probably overall the main reason why they were able to get to a Super Bowl. But at the same time, Kyle Shanahan and his offense were just so good and so creative last year. They were scoring points left and right. And that was with Jimmy Garoppolo as a quarterback. And he had an up and down year. But could you imagine what that offense would look like if they had a legitimate quarterback that they could rely on week in and week out to make plays, get the job done, and be the main reason why the team has won? Because we saw Matt Ryan do that with Kyle Shanahan, and he won the MVP of the league. If you get Kyle Shanahan with Zach Wilson or Trey Lance, then I could see the San Francisco 49er team being a real problem going forward. I spent a lot of time talking about this last week when it came to the Baltimore Ravens, and that is, even though they are a very good football team, I think they are only able to win in one specific way using one specific formula, and that's running the ball and playing defense. And I do think when you look at this San Francisco 49er team, that is kind of a similar argument to be made about them, because right now there is a specific formula that they have to execute in order for them to win games against some of the elite teams in the NFL. And I do think last year they were able to execute that formula, but that was when they were more healthy with a relatively healthier offensive line, with George Kittle out there, with Raheem Mostert out there, guys like that. Now this year the injuries have been brutal, but what I'll also say is this. I think we should all agree Jimmy Garoppolo hasn't been that good this season, and he wasn't that good last year. He was obviously better than he is this year, but it's not like he was the reason why the San Francisco 49ers were improving so much, and he wasn't the reason why they got to the Super Bowl. You remember the game they played against the Green Bay Packers in the NFC Championship game, his numbers were like average. They didn't really pop off the chart to you at all. So really, ever since that game, I've kind of had my eyes open for Jimmy Garoppolo. And I also feel like, without looking at the numbers, if you were to ask me, Zach, when are the San Francisco 49ers at their best? It's when they're running the ball like crazy and when their defense is just cooking. And when I look at the San Francisco 49ers team and the personnel they have right now, even though sometimes they do show flashes, I'm just not necessarily sure right now if they have enough to get the job done. You look at their game against Green Bay tonight, they're at home, which is good, and they do have some playmakers that are going to be out there. I really like this. But let's look at this injury report tonight for the San Francisco 49ers. Jimmy Garoppolo is out with an ankle. I haven't even mentioned George Kittle yet, who's out for the next 8 weeks with a broken foot. You have Tevin Coleman out with a knee. And then you go to the COVID list. Kendrick Bourne, Brandon Ayuk, Trent Williams, and Deebo Samuel, who also wouldn't have even played anyway because of a hamstring. But all of those guys are going to be out. And then you look at the PUP list. They have offensive lineman Weston Richburg with a knee and defensive lineman Ronald Blair with a knee. So that's bad. And then look at injured reserve. Richard Sherman, Nick Bosa, Dee Ford, Raheem Mostert, Jeffrey Wilson, Jordan Reed, Solomon Thomas, Ziggy Ansah, Mark Nziocha, Jalen Hurd, and Chris Thompson. Those are some legitimate players that are on that list, and you need to get healthier if the San Francisco 49er team has any chance to succeed. And when you look at their wide receivers and their weapons and their playmakers tonight, they're really going to have to rely on guys like Richie James and Trent Taylor to make plays. They're really going to have to rely on Ross Dwelley to make plays and JaMycal Hasty. And if not, the San Francisco 49er team could be in big trouble tonight. Now, for Green Bay, they're affected by COVID as well. Their running back room is really, really light right now. Jamal Williams, Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, all either injured or dealing with COVID right now. So, for me, I don't even think this game should be played tonight, to be honest with you. We've seen the NFL give up one Thursday night football game and go a Thursday night without football, and I don't think Roger Goodell loved doing that, but ultimately, when you looked at the Chiefs and the Bills game, there was no way to play that game on that Thursday night, so that game gets moved. And then I don't think Roger Goodell really wanted to move another Thursday night football game. I don't think he wanted to have to deal with Fox and them having to move another one of their broadcasts, which they pay so much money for. So this game is getting... And the 49ers and Packers both seem to really be banged up right now. You may not realize this about Green Bay, but the Chicago Bears are very quietly still right on their tail in the NFC North. That's the thing. If San Francisco could somehow, some way win tonight, I do think all of a sudden people's eyes are really going to be open on the Green Bay Packers and the fact that their defense just isn't playing very good football right now. I think they're kind of the equivalent in the NFC to what the Tennessee Titans are in the AFC. A team that right now offensively is really good, but at the same time, you may not realize it if you don't watch it because winning has kind of kept it quiet, but their defense is not playing well and needs to be better. If they can't at least shut down and contain a Nick Mullins-led San Francisco 49ers offense tonight, there's a big problem. And if I'm a Packer fan, I'm really hoping to see my team able to stop the run a little bit better because the last couple of weeks, Tampa Bay, Houston, and last week, Minnesota did a really good job running the ball all over them.